Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right in to unpack one of the most disturbing, fascinating, and honestly, widely misunderstood behavioral experiments in history. Whether you're totally new to this topic or you've heard some whispers about it before, get ready. We're going to look at the data exactly as it unfolded.
Imagine, if you will, an absolutely perfect world. 8 mice, 4 males, 4 females, are placed inside this completely enclosed paradise. And I mean paradise. We're talking unlimited food, unlimited water. The cages, hand-cleaned on a strict schedule. The temperature is held perfectly stable. There are no diseases, absolutely no predators, and literally zero threats of any kind. It is a perfect, frictionless existence.
But exactly 5 years later, absolutely 0 mice survived. Every single one of them was dead. And here's the truly startling fact. Not a single death was caused by anything a vet could have actually diagnosed. There was no virus going around, no poisoning, no starvation, nothing like that. So you got to ask yourself, how does a perfect utopia end in a 100% extinction rate?
Section 1. A perfect mouse utopia. Okay, let's dive into this. To understand how a literal paradise collapses, we actually have to travel back to 1968 and meet an American ethologist named John Calhoun. He set up this massive experiment inside a federal research lab in Maryland, and he named it Universe 25. You see, Calhoun was obsessed. He had spent his entire career, 2 whole decades, chasing one specific haunting question: what happens to a society when nothing is hard anymore? He'd actually built 24 previous enclosures in forests, barns, labs, and amazingly, every single one of them eventually collapsed. So, Universe 25 was designed to be the final, perfect answer. It was a 9-foot square enclosure featuring what Calhoun called walk-up apartments reached by mesh tunnels. The food hoppers never ran empty, water never ran dry. He meticulously calculated that this space could comfortably support around 3,800 mice.
Let's track the chronological progression of this colony because it is incredibly eerie to watch unfold. On day 1, he drops the 8 founders inside. For the first 104 days, they just settle in. But then, they start breeding, and the population begins to double every 55 days. It's booming. By day 315, we've got over 600 animals living inside, jostling for space in those highest apartments. By day 560, the population hits its absolute peak at 2,200 mice, which, remember, is well below that 3,800 capacity. But it's crazy, they would never go higher than that. By day 920, the very last successful birth takes place. And finally, on May 23, 1973, the total extinction of the colony is complete.
Section 2. The behavioral sink.
So what exactly happened between day 315 and the end? Well, we enter a phase of horrifying collapse. In nature, when a mouse population grows beyond what a territory can handle, the surplus mice simply emigrate. They just pack up, leave, and find new ground. But in Universe 25, there was no new ground. The utopia cracked because the surplus population was trapped inside it. And because of this, normal social behavior completely fractured. The mice split into these distinct, highly dysfunctional groups. First, young males with no roles to fill just drifted to the center of the floor, forming these listless pools of bodies. When they were attacked, they wouldn't even fight back. They'd just absorb the damage and lay down again. Second, a completely frantic group of hyperactive males emerged. They moved faster than any other mice, violently forcing themselves into nests and skipping all normal courtship rituals. And third, the females, unable to find a safe place in this chaotic social order, retreated. They climbed all the way up to the highest apartments, completely isolated themselves, and entirely stopped reproducing.
Calhoun documented all this dysfunction and gave it a really evocative name: the behavioral sink. This is an absolutely crucial concept here. Even though food was abundant and equally available everywhere in the enclosure, the mice became compulsively wired to crowd around just a few specific feeders. They simply refused to eat alone. The presence of other mice had become so deeply embedded into their feeding instinct that a completely full, perfectly accessible feeder on the other side of the room was entirely useless to them. Think about that. They were practically starving for space while completely ignoring untouched resources just a few feet away. And as this behavioral sink took hold, the society rapidly broke down at its most fundamental level: the mothers. Defending a nest in this hyper-crowded environment took constant, grueling work. Exhausted males just stopped protecting their territories. Mothers were left to defend the nests all by themselves while nursing. And the stress, it completely broke them. They began turning on their own young. They abandoned pups across the enclosure. Some actually forgot which pups were theirs. And in the darkest corners of the colony, mothers began eating their own offspring. It was a total maternal failure. In some sections, fewer than 1 in 20 newborns, a mere 5%, actually survived to weaning. The social fabric wasn't just tearing at this point, it was completely dead.
Section 3. The Beautiful Ones.
Out of this horrific, violent chaos, the few surviving pups had absolutely no model of a functioning life. What they became is perhaps the most chilling part of the entire experiment. Calhoun named this new emerging generation the Beautiful Ones. Because these mice grew up in a world where every single social role was already filled, their nervous systems adapted in a truly terrifying way. They simply opted out of the species entirely. No joke. They never got into a single fight. They never attempted to mate. They engaged in absolutely zero social activity. They moved through the colony as if no other mouse existed. All they did day in and day out was eat, sleep, and obsessively groom themselves. Externally, they looked like the healthiest, most pristine mice in the whole enclosure. But internally, they were functionally dead. Section 4. Death of the Spirit. We really need to pause here for a second and think about what this actually means. The colony was just full of these perfectly groomed, isolated mice, waiting out their days while the frantic violence carried on in other pockets of the enclosure. No new mice were being born. The society was coasting toward an inevitable end. And this brilliantly illustrates Calhoun's most profound observation. He wrote, "The mice had died 2 deaths. The first was the death of the spirit. The second was the death of the body." The structural fabric that gave each individual mouse a reason to participate in the species had evaporated years before their physical bodies actually expired of old age.
Section 5. What really killed them?
Now, when this paper was first published, Universe 25 became a massive pop culture phenomenon. And unfortunately, it was almost entirely misunderstood. Everyone from urbanists to politicians pointed to the Beautiful Ones as this dire warning about the decay of modern life. The public myth quickly became comfort kills, abundance kills, a life with no struggle destroys itself. But that is not actually what Calhoun concluded. His actual written thesis was this: for a complex animal, a collapse is entirely logical if the number of individuals capable of filling meaningful roles greatly exceeds the number of roles available. Disruption inevitably follows. It wasn't the comfort that destroyed them, it was the complete disappearance of meaningful roles. The fighters had no one to fight. The mothers had no help. The young inherited a world with absolutely nothing to do.
I really want you to take away this vital distinction. The food never ran out. The water never ran out. What ran out was something nobody thought to put into the paradise to begin with: a reason to participate. Comfort didn't kill the mice. The comfort just removed the natural friction that made being alive feel like something.
Section 6. The Human Choice. It's really easy to look at this experiment and feel a sense of impending doom about our own crowded modern cities, right? But John Calhoun was not a doomer. He didn't spend the rest of his career preaching the apocalypse. He actually spent it trying to prevent it because he believed humans could choose differently. We have a unique capability. Calhoun called it ideational generativity. Now that is a long academic phrase for a very empowering idea. It basically means that as our physical space contracts in crowds, we don't have to turn on each other or just check out entirely like the Beautiful Ones. Instead, we can extend ourselves into conceptual space. We can build new ideas, new digital networks, new art, and create entirely new societal roles that simply did not exist before. So the crucial point is, the way out of the behavioral sink is to purposefully keep making new reasons to be here.
The experiment is still sitting right there in the data. A perfectly designed paradise. 8 mice, 5 years, and a complete silent extinction caused by a lack of purpose. The mice were trapped by their biology. They literally didn't have a choice. We, on the other hand, do. We can build our own meaning. So, as we pack closer together in our modern world, the lingering question I want to leave you with is this: